Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the Business Spotlight series. I'm here with Dickon Hepworth from Pon Bike Performance. How you doing, Dickon?
Very well, thanks, Mike. Yeah,
Good
nice to
stuff.
see you.
Thanks very much for joining us. So if you could give us a bit more background as to exactly who you are, what you do, how long you've been doing it for, please.
Sure thing. Well, I've just recently sort of celebrated my 25th anniversary, not necessarily 25 birthday, but 25th anniversary
Yeah,
in the job. So,
nice.
yeah, we are essentially a bicycle distributor for the UK. To give you a bit more background to that, we have a couple of brands that we distribute exclusively within the UK and Ireland. Santa Cruz Mountain Bikes being one of them, probably the most well known, and Cervelo road bikes being the other one. So yeah, that's essentially the business as we are now, but we've got a sort of a very long and sort of varied background that yeah, we'll probably discuss shortly.
Excellent. So how did you get into that? 25 years, what were you doing before, or what inspired you to get into
Yeah, I think
bikes?
like probably 99% of people in the bike industry, they were into biking and
Yeah.
cycling. Not many people come into the bike industry to make money. Certainly, they've probably come in and lost a lot of money in the last few years. But yeah, essentially, I grew up locally, grew up in Ilkley, living with my mum there. Started biking from a young age, kind of around the place, and this was a little bit longer ago than 25 years, unfortunately. But it was sort of pre the dawn of mountain biking, so we were using our BMXs and stuff and going into the woods. And pretty soon those things fell apart and weren't suitable for what we were doing with them on the moor as well. So it was around that time, the late to mid 80s, that mountain biking sort of appeared from the west, from North America,
Yeah.
and the first mountain bikes appeared. So got hold of one of those, started going out onto the moor with it, and got hooked very, very rapidly. And that became a sort of real hobby of mine through, school, university. And then when I left university, I was lucky enough to sort of live and ride, as I say, in the Leeds area. And there was a very famous, well-known bike shop at the time called Stif Mountain Bikes that was based in Headingley.
Mhm.
And I was racing a lot of the time, doing cross country, a bit of downhill, but just generally riding bikes. And got to the point where I had some sponsorship. I initially rode for Chevron Cycles, who were based in and still are based in
Yeah.
Otley. And then I moved on to Stif Mountain Bikes and was sponsored by them up to quite a good level. I was racing in sort of elite category domestically in the UK on a mountain bike. And at the time, Stif was starting to import some of the brands from America that weren't necessarily readily available, in across the market in the UK. And one of those brands that they got hold of was Santa Cruz. So you could buy a Santa Cruz from Stif exclusively in the UK. And as that brand became more popular, we started to get calls from other bike shops saying, "Hey, I've got a customer. Can I buy a Santa Cruz from you?" So we started selling a few to bike shops as well as to customers. And it became apparent, and this was like 98, 99, basically.
Yeah.
And it became apparent that there was enough of a business there to look at setting up a separate distribution business. So the founder of Stif at the time, Paul Morfitt, he approached me and said, "Hey, look, I need to set up a distribution business. Would you be interested in
Mhm.
in heading it up for me?" And I said, "That's an amazing offer. If someone is interested in bikes, great." But I was actually leaving to go to Australia in 1999 to do a big sort of Millennium New Year's Eve extravaganza with a load of university mates. And he said,
Yeah.
"Well, that's good, but when are you coming back?" And I said, "Well, I've got a one-way ticket, so I don't know." Anyway, long story short, ended up in a good negotiating position because I was in Australia and I was like,
Yeah.
"Well,
Yeah.
it'd be a good offer to come back to the UK again," which he did. And I came back in May of 2000, and we started up what was Jungle Products, which was the distribution business. This at the time was based in a little back room in the shop in Headingley.
Yeah.
And we very quickly outgrew that. We had deliveries coming in, and we had to basically we had to schedule deliveries from the States when there was a good weather window, because we had to have all the boxes lined up in the car park out the back because we didn't have room to store them in the building. So it was pretty cool to see that expansion at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And anyway, we had to find some premises fairly quickly to move the distribution side to. And Paul has lived in Pateley Bridge for,
Yeah.
well, as long as I can remember, originally from Leeds, but Pateley. I was in Leeds, so we had a bit of a tussle. He said, I want to move it up here. And I was like, well, that's a long way for me to come in the morning. Anyway, he won because he owned the business. And we found this premises where we've been since then in Summerbridge. So we moved up here in 2004, I believe, from Leeds, set up the distribution business here, and really, cut a very long story short, the rest is history. The business expanded hugely. We took over a very small warehouse, which is actually where my office is now. That was our first entire warehouse for the UK, and now it basically holds an office of 15 people. And now we've got all the warehousing sort of stretching out the back, and we've been lucky enough that we've been able to take over adjacent warehouses as we've expanded. So we've got quite a good footprint up here. And yeah, so that was the kind of the move out of Stif and the origins of the business from there. And then we were bought effectively. We sold the business to what is our now owners, Pon Holdings, which is a big Dutch company. Now that may seem quite a step from where we were, but essentially Santa Cruz Bicycles themselves were bought by Pon in 2016, I believe. So they were bought by Pon. We were a little bit worried about our relationship as a distributor, what was going to happen to that. But they bought Santa Cruz because it was a very successful business at the time. And soon after, Paul, who was the partner with me in Jungle, was looking to retire. So I approached Santa Cruz and at the time and said, hey, look, are you interested in buying his shares before I go down, looking for a management buyout potential? And they came back and said, yes, we are interested, but we don't do sort of part ownership. We would want to look to buy the whole business. So we then went through a buyout with them, an acquisition in 2018, which coincided with the birth of my second child. So that was an interesting time. And yeah, so we effectively sold the business, something I've been helped found and set up and run for at that point a number of years. And yeah, we're now under new ownership and have been for nearly just coming up 8 years. But yeah, it's been quite an amazing expansion and really
quite a journey.
Given me a view of the different side of the coin. Now working for a very big company after being my own boss for going on for 20 years. So
how you found that in terms of that transition?
I mean, it's different for sure. I think it was something I gave an awful lot of thought to, and actually Paul at the time said, as much as I'm looking to retire, he said, if this deal isn't right for you, then we won't do it. We'll look for another alternative.
Yeah.
But for me, it was very much about securing the future of the business and the employment of the people here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of your viewers and contacts will know what it's like to run a business. It's hugely rewarding, but it can be very stressful, and it's not something you ever turn off from. You don't go home at 5 o'clock and clock off, and it's always there, and there are stresses and strains and good times and bad times. And I just thought, I'm ready for a change, and I've always been up for sort of a challenge, and I think that I went into it kind of fairly eyes open on what it might be. We've had a huge amount of turmoil in the industry since then, which has definitely changed the landscape massively. But in terms of that, I've actually found it pretty good. I've enjoyed having a little bit more direction, but at the same time, they very much let us get on with our day-to-day jobs. They don't micromanage us. They don't get involved. We're very responsible for our own P&L. Responsible for our own strategies, all of those sort of things. So it kind of feels like the best of both worlds. We've got a very big and sort of accommodating business behind us, but we're free to sort of choose our own path to find our way to the targets. So
Brilliant. How would you describe that journey then in one word, if you had to give it one word?
One word. That is a challenge in itself.
One or two.
Stimulating.
There we go. Stimulate. There we go. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I would
Um,
say stimulating. Yeah, you can take that. You can take that many different ways, but
yeah, someone this
stimulating.
morning described theirs as adventure, like an adventure. It's been an
Hmm.
adventure.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah,
covers a
absolutely.
lot of scenarios within that.
Yeah, yeah,
So you mentioned about the industry, just knowing COVID and trying to get hold of bikes and stuff like that during that industry, and the demand was just like nothing else. To
yeah,
then, seeing the industry not in as much demand as it was, and
yeah.
it's been quite turbulent as it has been for a lot of businesses. There was
Mm,
some winners, some losers, and then the winners. Some of the winners have come out, and a number of years later, they're not winning as much as they
yeah.
were. So I suppose a picture of the times that they're in at the moment. Um, yeah, in terms of going through that yourself as a business, what was that like? And
I
where's
mean, that
where's the kind
was,
of sector now?
yeah. I mean, that was. I would definitely not use stimulating to describe that period. Uh, I mean, unbelievable. That sort of that first like what the hell's going to happen kind of thing with the pandemic, and then the realization with bike shops being deemed essential service that we would stay open. So that was in itself like, okay, great, we've got that. But then operating with the limitations we had in terms of exposure, we had bought very expensive thermal thermometers for the entrances of the building, so people were getting scanned. People were turning up for work, getting scanned, and then they couldn't come in because the temperature was, above that limit, whatever it was
Yeah,
at the time. And then obviously the demand that took off as well. So you were kind of operating with a reduced workforce anyway because of the proximity rules and stuff like that. But then dealing with the demand that was, 4 or 5 times anything that we dealt with before. So I mean, it was an incredible time. It was very, it's kind of like back to basics. Everyone was just like hands on, like getting stuff. But it also presented a lot of challenges. As you said, the stock ran out very quickly, lead times through all sorts of supply chain issues and
yeah,
over stimulated sort of forecasts, if you like, from people. But it was a really, there's a whole lot of stories about it in the industry right now. I'm sure you can read it to your heart's content. But essentially, it put everyone on the back foot, and the sort of huge orders that were going in at the time because the lead times were so long. There was this huge fear of missing out on orders, and all of that came to a peak very quickly when the pandemic finished. And I think where the industry was wrong-footed was that expectation that people who bought a bike and would tried biking or come back to biking would stay in the sport and keep doing it. And of course, they went back to their holidays and their golf and whatever else they were doing before.
yeah,
And right around that time was when the huge lead times that had been experienced all came home to roost. So it's like those 3,000 bikes that you wanted 18 months ago are now being delivered, but you've got 1,000 customers,
yeah,
and we're still seeing the back end of that now in the industry. I mean, we were fortunate enough in that we're a niche brand. Both our brands are high-end brands. They're what we consider not your first purchase of a bike. So our numbers are not as big as others, but we're
yeah,
affected as much as anybody else by lead times. The parts we fit to our bikes are the same as fitted to many other bikes. And so, yeah, the overstock in the industry has led to this really disastrous sort of collapse of retails, discounting everywhere, and everything else. And it's slowly pulling itself out of it, but it's taken 2 years. There's been a huge amount of businesses that have folded, gone under. Some very big, well-known businesses
mm,
at the time as well. So, yeah, huge turbulence. But I think the thing that is interesting that a lot of people forget is that in 2018, which was really the last full year before the pandemic hit,
yeah,
the bike industry, especially in the UK, was not in a good position. We were in a similar position of a lot of shops going bust. Demand was on the decline. So we are writing ourselves back to that position, but it wasn't a healthy market to start with. So
yeah,
I think it's sort of taken a lot of people by surprise, is that they thought we'd bottom out at this level, and it's kind of continued down below that level. But the green shoots are there. The BA, the Bicycle Association, which publishes sort of data and import information stuff for the UK bike industry. They've had, last year was the first year with actually continuous growth that we've had in 5 years, I think. So
Wow.
yeah, people are starting to buy bikes again,
Yeah.
but it's just on a much lower level, that
Sure.
people remember, because it's 2018 was quite a while ago.
Yeah. So what out of all of that is your biggest lesson as a leader, Dickon, for
I think,
taking it into anything else that comes along?
yeah, I think it's that understanding that even if you grow as a business, and we at the time during the pandemic, we still had Stif, the retail business, as part of our business. So we grew to just shy of 50 people in the organization, with the
Wow.
distribution business, the retail business. We opened a second shop down in Bristol, down in Winterbourne area as well. Just that was literally, we opened about a month before the pandemic. So that was either good or terrible timing, depending on your point of view. But I think it's that understanding of looking ahead and making those decisions for the business that are right for the business. And unfortunately, we've had to downsize an awful lot. So we're now down to 20 people. We had to close the Stif retail business, which was a very, very tough decision. That business is 40 years of legacy in the mountain bike
Yeah.
industry. But it's the realization that not everything good should last forever or needs to last forever.
Yeah.
It was definitely the right decision to close the business, but your emotional attachment to it can cloud your judgment. And I think having those emotions and that attachment to things can make a big difference as a business leader. I think especially leading your teams and people, and you've got to show some vulnerability in your leadership. I think that's something I've really learned as a way forward for people. But you can't let it cloud your sort of business judgment at the same time, and you've got to make those tough decisions. And we've actually, as much as last year was a very tough year, we said goodbye to a lot of friends and colleagues who've been working with us a long time. They've all gone on and found great positions out of the industry, within the industry. And as a business, we're now right sized for the market carrying forward. And that was a big learning for me. Is like, as much as you make those hard decisions, they're the right ones, not just for the business, but the people here are now more motivated, they're now more focused, and they can kind of see their place in the business more.
Sure. Great. Good lesson. Thank you very much for sharing that. In terms of your inspiration and to do what you do and to continue to do it over 25 years, what's that for you now? It keeps getting you to go out of bed and do this.
Well, the kids get me out of bed.
Yeah.
That's
thought you might say that.
yeah,
Financially and physically.
yeah. I think, yeah, it's a really interesting one, Mike, especially having just done sort of 25 years, and it obviously does cause you to look back. I turned 50 last year myself as well, so there's a lot of those sort of milestones that come in. I think ultimately biking, I'm doing something. I've been very, very fortunate to have a hobby that's turned into a job, and not just a job, but a business and a way of life, if you like. And I think remembering those connections when you have the more stressful times and you're sort of buried in the work and things, and you're looking at spreadsheets and things like that, and all it takes for me is to go back and ride a bike outside for half an hour, whatever it is, and go, actually, this is what's important. And I think it's having the balance. That's a bit of a sort of cliche these days, but it is. It's realizing that, what, we're selling expensive bikes to people. It's not hard. We're not saving lives here. It's not the end of the world, and it's just keep having fun with what you're doing, and having that sort of balance with your sort of work life, and remembering what you're doing is supposed to be fun at the end of the day. So I feel very grateful it has kept me that way, and I certainly had probably the toughest years in business the last 3 or 4 years, but I think I found it very rewarding to come through it and sort of look at those problems and like, all right, how can we solve them, and how can we bring them together? And having the team here to help me do it, I sort of grew the distribution business from me essentially up to where we are today. I've got HR, I've got commercial director, I've got an FD, and all those things that you need to run a successful business. But it's learning that those people are there to help support the business and drive it forward. And I let them do their job basically. So
Yeah, nice.
yeah, having a good team is key to it all.
Another good share. Thank you. Are you still getting out on the bike as much as you?
Yeah, I am very much so. I know that it's keeps me sane basically, and
Yeah.
I'd like to think it makes me a better boss. It certainly makes me a better husband. My wife would say. She gets very annoyed. She knows when I need to go out my bike. She forces me out the door. No, go and
Yeah.
ride your bike.
Some of
So
the best clarity comes from a personal spit. I like riding a bike, but yeah, the amount of clarity when you come back and just everything kind of seems in its place, in its right place.
yeah. It's just having that mental time to switch off and do it, and that certainly helps me keep going. I think also having those other interests, the family, the kids, they're at school, they're all doing sports. I never in my life thought I'd be a football dad, but I've turned into a football dad, and it's those things. It just keeps that perspective. That's the word I'd be looking for. Perspective on things is really important. I think it's it's very easy as a business owner or a business run, as a director of a business to get lost in the kind of day to day, and it's really important to step back and kind of take stock whenever you can.
Nice. So if you were to give some advice, say back to yourself at 18, based on what you know now, in hindsight, what would that piece of advice be?
Don't ride motorbikes. That's one. That nearly ended my career and all sorts of things. I think, crikey, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't feel like I regret anything that I've done in the past and the way forward. I think for me personally, being a little bit more assertive, and sort of if I go with my gut a little bit more, I think having the conviction that if you feel something is right, it probably is right, and to do it. I think some caution in business is always good to have, but I think that's why you've got an FD in the business most of the time. Yeah, I think trust your gut with stuff and go for it. I think too many people sort of think, what if I've done that, and what if I did that? And I think that's the worst thing, is to look back and say, oh, I wish I'd had a go at that, or what if we'd explored that avenue. And I think if you've got the resources and you've got the sort of the team to do it, I think I would just say go for it and really explore those resources where you can.
Nice advice. Thank you. So lastly, in terms of latest news about what you guys are up to, or even in case of sharing the website, contact details, if people watching would like to get in touch, feel free to do that now.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we're sort of the business is Pon Bike Performance, as we said, is sort of now owned by Pon and their bike division. The website is PBP UK. You can search us up on that. We are a distributor, so we're not necessarily public facing, but we have a customer service warranty team. We have a big showroom up here. We deal with a lot of local shops. So Prologue in Harrogate is one of our biggest Cervelo dealers, so we're often there. We just announced a new distribution deal with another brand that was as part of the Pon portfolio. So One Up Components, which is a Canadian-based brand in Squamish, who make really great tools and dropper posts. For those people who know what a dropper post is, it's something that drops to saddle height when you're on a mountain bike. So they're under the Pon portfolio, and we've just announced a distribution deal that we're doing that exclusively in the UK. So we're launching that as of March the 1st in the UK. So there's a lot of work going on with that. And we've got our annual trade show for the bike industry, which is called the Core Bike Show down at Silverstone, is happening at the end of next week. So that's a very busy time for us as a business. But in the summer months, we're out there. We do demos with Santa Cruz, events with Cervelo. So for those of you who are into bikes, then maybe we'll see you out there on the trails.
Plenty going on, and good riding around where you're based as well. So.
Yeah, very good.
Nice. Thanks, Dickon. Been a real pleasure talking with you, and I wish you all the best for the next 25 years.
Pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having us.